Bert and I come down to the dock about 6 o'clock in the early morning. Bert went into the boathouse to fetch the pots and the slickers, and I went out on the dock to start up the Bluebird. I stepped into the cockpit to loosen her up with a few turns. You could hear it were cold, so I advanced the spark and gave it more choke and cranked her up in earnest. Well, I got it started. Bert come out on the dock with the pots and the slickers. "Throw 'em aboard, Bert." Bert threw 'em aboard. "Cast off the bow, Bert." Bert cast off the bow. He cast off the stern, loosed the springer, hopped aboard, gave the dock a shove with the boat hook, and the Bluebird slithered out into harbor. We hit number 2 about on schedule when I sniffed a cold breeze coming in off the ocean, laden with humdidy. That were me sniffing. That were the breeze. It weren't long before old Greasy Frog Light started in a thumping.
Hoo-oh! Hoo-oh!
That were old Greasy Frog. Presently, we were locked in a dungeon of fog. I couldn't see Bert, and he couldn't see me. I told Bert to cut engine so's we could listen for the Bangor packet, about due through at that time. "Cut engine, Bert." Bert cut engine. "Give a blast to the horn, Bert." "Give it another one, Bert." That were a good un. But it weren't good enough. For out of the fog, about 100 yards to port, come the Bangor packet, bearing down at a full 10 knots. The Bangor packet smucked the Bluebird about midships and drove on through her like green corn goes through the new made. The water rose up to our necks before we decided to swim for it. I dove down about a fathom or so as to avoid the 2 whirring propellers of the Bangor packet as she went o'er top. I come up t'other side and cried out, "Bert! Bert, are you there?" There weren't no answer, so I thrashed about in the water till I hit upon a hard object about a foot or so beneath the surface. I grabbed a hold of it, pulled it up, and it were Bert, only he were full of water. I just held his nose above the waves as best I could, till by some stroke of luck we fetched on to a buoy. I clumb atop it, pulled Bert up beside me, emptied him, and we were near dried out by the time a fishing smack come along, picked us up, and brought us back into Kennebunkport, Maine. Now, if you're ever down east and want to go a-fishing, you have a standing invitation to ride on the Bluebird, too, with Bert and I.
Kenneth Fowler had had an awful season. Everything he'd planted had been eaten by blackbirds just as soon as he scattered the seed. Fire had destroyed his blueberry ground at raking time, and termites had ate up his ice house. And on top of that, a stray cat had drowned in his well. By October, he decided he'd better go out and stock up food for the winter. Loading up his gun, the one with the side-by-side barrels, he started into the woods to find some game. All day long, he walked without firing a shot. In fact, he was all set to head in just about sundown when he spied a fox behind a rock about 2 rods distance. Taking careful aim, he almost squeezed the trigger when he sighted another fox about 20 feet away from the first. Well, he aimed somewhere in between. The shot hit a rock, split it in two, and killed both foxes. The kick from the gun knocked him into the stream behind him, and when he came to, his right hand was on a beaver's tail, his left hand on an otter's head, and his trouser pockets were so full of trout that a button popped off his fly and killed a partridge. Camden Pierce, who lives out to Mechanics Falls, Maine, was rocking in his parlor one afternoon, listening to the radio set when the telephone started in a jangling. He picked it up. It was the radio station calling. "Hello? This Camden Pierce?" He said, "Yes, sir." "Well, what's the name of that tune we're playing?" Camden knew it. Battle Hymn of the Republic. They said, "You got it. Besides that, you just won a 2 weeks trip to New York City." Of course, Camden never been out of the state. He'd only been to Bangor once. And that was the time the bull moose wandered into town and was chased into the hardware store by the school children. Camden left for New York, and 2 weeks later he was back. Mayor Johnson had thought it was fitting to have a reception committee, band and all. And when Camden stepped out onto the platform, the mayor said, "How'd you like New York?" Camden answered, "There was so much going on at the depot, I didn't get a chance to see the village."
What's that I smell cooking, Sarah?
"Why, Charles, that's a sausage."
What's a sausage?
"Something new I'm trying. Here you are. See what you think of it."
It looks good. Smells good. Tastes good. But after you clean it, there's not much to it.
I was a spectator up to the Skowhegan Fair last summer. They had stock car racing, diving from the high platform, and teams of horses pulling against each other. Every summer they've got a feature attraction. Years ago, they'd had William Jennings Bryan up to re-give his Cross of Gold speech. This year, the feature was the releasing of a lighter-than-air balloon at 12 o'clock on the last day of the fair. Howard Perkins and I won the raffle to take her up. After a few words of instruction, we climbed into the gondola, cut the mooring lines, and we were out of sight in about 4 minutes. We were over the ocean in an hour when the wind veered north and took us back over land. So we let some of the gas out and come down to see where we were. Saw a farmer plowing in the field, so I leaned over and cried out, "Where are we?"
"You're no balloon, you damn fool."
My aunt has a summer cottage up on the crossroads at East Vassalboro, Maine. One day last summer, I was out on the porch rocking and reading the newspaper when I heard a foreign sports car come up the road towards me and go right on through the west intersection. He jammed his brakes on down at the Barrens, turned around, and come right on up again. He turned around, way down at the blueberry factory, and came straight on up. This time he stopped right out front.
"Which way to East Vassalboro?"
"Don't you move a goddamn inch."
I was standing outside Sutherland's IGA store one morning when I heard a flivver approaching down the street toward me.
"Which way to Millinocket?"
"Well, you can go west at the next intersection, get on to the turnpike, go north through the toll gate at Augusta, till you come to that intersection. Well, no. You could keep right on this tar road. It changes to dirt now and again. Just keep the river on your left. You'll come to crossroads, and let me see. Then again, you can take that scenic coastal route that the tourists use. And after you get to Bucksport, well, let me see now. Millinocket. Come to think of it, you can't get there from here.
I've been driving up this hill for 2 hours. Isn't there any end to it, farmer?"
Oh, hell, stranger, there ain't no hill here. You just lost your 2 hind wheels.
"What do you think of that man out your way? Or would you call him an honest man or a liar?"
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to call him a liar, but I heard tell by them as knows that when he wants his cows to come in from pasture, he's got to get somebody else to call 'em.
"Why are you so het up, Tom?"
Oh, I had to shoot my dog.
"Or was he mad?" Eben Robe went down to the Tremont Temple in Boston one Saturday night to hear Norman Thomas speak. Next Monday, he was preaching socialism to Enoch Turner over the back fence. "You know, Enoch," he was saying, "under socialism, a person shares everything."
You mean to say, Eben, that if you had 2 farms, you'd give me one of them?
"Yep. If I had 2 farms, Enoch, I'd give you one of them."
You mean to say, Eben, that if you owned 2 hayricks, you'd give me one of them?
"Yep. If I had 2 hayricks, I'd give you one of them."
Or if you had 2 hogs, Eben, would you give me one of them?
And you, Enoch, you know I got 2 hogs.
We always said that Tom Riles should have been a preacher. Every Sunday he was the first one into church and the last one out. He even had himself a special seat with his name onto it, right up front by the pulpit. When people came in late, Tom would turn round in his seat and stare at them. One Sunday, the Reverend Forbes preached an unusually inspiring sermon about how Christ walked upon the waters. After the service, Tom headed straight for Decker's Pond and ran right into it, clear up to his neck in the water. Some people come by and asked him how the water was. He replied, "Not bad, not bad at all. I took 2 or 3 steps before I went down." Albert Tyler was snoozing on his porch one morning when he was rudely awakened by a moose sniffing around amongst his carrots. Quick as a wink, Albert had his gun off the wall and shot the moose in the hind leg just to wound him, so he wouldn't get away. The moose flopped over on his side, and Albert dragged him into the barn and bedded him down for the night with some hay and water, after cleaning the moose's wound, of course. In 2 days' time, Albert painted the barn a bright red with white lettering on the side so everybody could read it. See the moose, 10 cents, 15 cents, special family rate. In a week's time, Albert's place looked more like a fair than a farm. A fella come through with his family and paid Albert his 15 cents to see the moose. Albert took one look at the man and one look at his family and said, "Here's your money, mister. I don't want it. It's worth a good deal more for my moose to see your family than it can be for your family to see my moose." Virgil Bliss was the dirtiest man in Hancock County. Why, he was so dirty that in the wintertime steam would come out from between his sheets like it comes off of a manure pit. One summer, people complained so much about Virgil just being around, the constable brought him in before Judge Dyer.
Virgil, have you ever combed your hair?
"Oh, I did once, but it almost killed me."
How often do you change your shirt?
"Oh, about once a year." "Why? How often do you change yours?"
Once a day, and sometimes twice when it's hot.
"But, Judge, how can you call me dirty when you soiled 365 shirts to my one?" Well, that was all the judge needed. His gavel come down, and right then and there he sentenced Virgil to a bath. It didn't take Virgil long to get dirty again. A month later, Virgil was pulling pots in the harbor when a pot pulled him instead. He sank straightway to the bottom and never did come up. People say that the dirt just drug him down. Chester Coombs was that handsome fella who married the Everett girl, and she's kind of pretty, I always thought. But when Chester come back from the hospital after viewing his firstborn, he said, "Lester, you can give me a sharp knife and a soft piece of white pine, and I could whittle you a better-looking baby than what I got."
I was doing the swearing in down at the courthouse last winter when they brought up that old feller to the stand. He'd been witness to the accident out on the Otter Cove Road. Summer people speeding along had run over one of Oscar Glover's cows. Same one that'd been clawed by a bear 2 winters ago. I got the witness up before the judge. What's your name?
An old bunker,
How old are you?
about 85,
Where do you live?
Bailey Island Way.
You lived there all your life?
Not yet. We were clamming along the beach one Sunday when we come upon a body in the kelp. We didn't recognize the face, but thought it might have been old John who tended the lighthouse on the point. We went directly out and knocked on John's door. You there, John?
Dan right, I'm here. What can I do for you?
We found a body down in the kelp. Thought it might have been you.
Wearing a red shirt?
Yes, sir, red shirt.
Blue trousers?
They were blue trousers.
Rubber boots?
Yep, rubber boots.
Was they high or low?
They was low boots.
You sure?
Well, come to think of it, they were high boots turned down low.
Oh, well then, 'tweren't me.
My wife, Clara, died 5 o'clock this morning. It took me half the day to fix a box for her. I ran out of nails twice, bruised my thumb with a hammer, and split 3 covers before I got the 4th one nailed down tight. I pulled my back lifting Clara to the wagon, and the halter broke as we come out of the band, so we had to drive into town with Bessie pulling crooked. Down the last hill, we got out of control like, and Clara just slid off the back and shot straight through the post office window. I ran into the post office to see that no one was hurt, and found Tut Tuttle, the postman, peering at me through the stamped window. Lucky I had the grate-in down, he said. Sure was, I replied. Did you pass the preacher and the undertaker on the road, he asked. Comin' or goin', I queried. Goin', he replied. They started for your place about an hour ago. Guess I missed 'em, I said. Yup, I guess you did, said Tut. I tell you, Tut, I said, my day's been one long fezzle from beginning to end.
Harry Whitfield's niece, Winona, the one that's married and lives out of state, asked him down to Oyster Bay, New York for Easter. Harry decided it might be a nice thing to go down. First he sent to Bangor for a ticket. A week later it came back stamped Tunk Lake, Maine, to Grand Central Station, New York, and return. The day he was to leave, it was raining hard. Harry put on his oilskin, arrived at the Tunk Lake Station a good hour ahead of time. Sure enough, at 8:30, he heard the whistle. The one he usually sets his watch by. When it blows, it's a good indication that the train is leaving Goodwin Siding, about 4 miles up the track. 6 minutes later, Harry climbed aboard, and the only other person on the train was Roger Griffin, heading for Ellsworth for supplies. The train started pulling out. All of a sudden, Harry felt a stream of water on his neck. He looked up and saw that it was leaking through the roof, something awful. Roger suggested they move, so they got up and went to a seat opposite the stove in the middle of the car. The train stopped and took on water just east of Franklin. Then they hitched up below the Cordwood near Washington Junction. Then about 3 miles short of Ellsworth, just as Roger and Harry were settling back in their seats, there was a sudden jolt. Harry lurched forward against the seat in front. The train shuddered, then stopped. Harry called down to Ben Twitchell, the conductor, who'd fallen on the floor. "What we hit?" "Most probably a moose." Sure enough, when they got out, there was a cow moose staring into the cab of the engine. She had a few scratches on her, but that was all. "Turn off that whistle," called Ben to the engineer. "I can't. She jammed open when we hit the moose. Besides that, we sprung one of the boiler plates and the front wheel's clean off the tracks." Well, Ben went up and took care of the whistle with the blunt end of the fire axe. One of the section men who'd seen the accident got word up to the wrecker, and around 2 p.m. we limped into Ellsworth. "We could have got here faster than if we'd walked," spat Roger. Harry then commented, "Soon as I get back, I'm unloading my 10 shares of Maine Central." That evening, Harry was going through Portland on the Pullman sleeper, and next morning when he woke up, he was at Grand Central Depot. His written instructions read, "Walk through the station, get a subway train for Times Square, then get out, follow the red lights until you come to another train, then hop aboard for Penn Station." "Confusing, ain't it?" he'd said to Roger the day before as he was going over the instructions. Roger had said, "Hope you got your compass, Harry." Well, Harry walked through the station, noticing that the ground floor alone covered about 5 acres. My, that was a big station. He got onto the subway all right, but it seemed the entire population of the city of New York was already on the train. Well, sir, she started a jiggling and a shuddering. And after a while started to move. Everything was all right until he got out at Times Square. His instructions just said, "Follow the red lights." However, Harry noticed that some went east and others went west. Harry asked a stranger, who said not to worry, and that he was still confused after riding these trains for 40 years. The stranger got him on the right train, and not long after, Harry was sitting down on a seat on the Long Island Railroad, the last leg of his journey. Elm Heist, Stewart Side, Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, and Jamaica all change. When Harry handed the conductor a ticket to Oyster Bay, the conductor said something about changing at Jamaica. Harry said, "Isn't this the train to Oyster Bay?" Conductor told him it was. "Well," said Harry, "then I'm not doing any changing. I've spent 24 hours up and down, here and there. Now I bought a ticket to Oyster Bay, and I'm not getting off the train until we get there." A little later, Harry, just a mite reluctant, changed trains at Jamaica.
Amity, All East, Williston, Albertson, Roslyn, Greenvale, Glen Head, Sea Cliff, Glen Street, Glen Cove, Locust, Valley Mill Neck, and Oyster Bay train on track number 9.
By the time Harry finally arrived at Oyster Bay, he decided to hang on to that Maine Central stock. Kinda weary-like, he clumb down onto the platform. His niece Winona was waiting and said, "How was the trip, Uncle Harry?" He answered, "My Lord, Winona, but that was a long poke."